Hello and welcome. My name is Benedikt Zillner, and today I would like to introduce you to our new Splint Designer. The Splint Designer is a new module in our dental software, and it is available from the version 4.0. To use the Splint Designer, you need to have the function digital occlusion, and in this module it is necessary that you imported scan data of your patient. To start the Splint Designer, you find then the button in the viewer on the right side. We have two splints available. We have the CTS splint and the PTS splint, the comfort therapy splint and the positioning therapy splint. The differences between these two splints are quite simple. The CTS splint is the splint where you go straight forward. You have the positioning in the lower jaw. You place the lower jaw for the splint only based on the opening movement of your patient, and you have no manual placement of the condyle. In the software, it looks like this. You have on the bottom side the opening movement of your patient, and you use this to open your jaw to have area for your splint. On the PTS splint, you have more possibilities. You have the possibility to position your splint in the upper or lower jaw. You can place your lower jaw based not only on the opening movement, but also on the protrusion, retrusion, opening, closing, and rotation movement. And you can manually place your condyles. In the software, it looks like this. We have on the bottom line, again, our movements. Here, the protrusion, retrusion, opening, closing. On the right side, we have the rotation angle, and at the top, we can take our condyle and make a manual placement of them to create our splint position. The workflow in the Splint Designer is quite simple. After the positioning of the lower jaw on the CTS splint, we have the insert direction, define the splint outline, and edit the splint surface, and then we are done. On the PTS splint, we have one extra step where we can choose if we want to use the upper or lower jaw for our splint position. The rest of the workflow is the same. Now I want to show you our material settings for the splint. On the top, we can choose if we want to create a profile for the 3D printing or for the milling. And now I want to go through each of these settings. First, we have our occlusal settings. The occlusal settings defines the desired thickness of the splint between the upper and lower jaw, in the molar region, for example. It's up to you where to set this setting. Then we have the peripheral thickness. The peripheral thickness defines the desired thickness of the splint in the vestibular or lingual area, and this is material dependent. Also material dependent is the minimal thickness. It's based on the manufacturer specifications for the minimum printable or millable thickness of the material. Then we have the spacer thickness. The spacer thickness defines the so-called air gap between the splint and the tooth. When you set it really small, you have a really tight fit of your splint. Quite large, you have a bit of a loose splint. It's also material depending. The retention defines the undercut of the splint below the tooth equator. When we set the value of 0.7, for example, 0.7 millimeter, we go below the tooth equator, and the rest of the teeth is blocked out. In the software, we have the visualization in the insert direction here on the right side with this gray-brown shadow, where you see where of the teeth we would have an undercut with this insert direction. And on the step where we define the outline of the splint, we have a more detailed view of this undercut, and we see how deep is the block out of my teeth in the software, and I can follow the line for my outline of the splint. Now I have a special setting. the take scan position for splint design. These settings make a splint a CPO splint. On the left, you see we have this closed position without any splint in our occlusion with our occlusal contact. Then we go with the lower jaw to our splint position. And what our software does, it generates now a splint for you with the same occlusal contact on the splint your patient would have without a splint. So the splint surface you get from our software is directly functional. You don't have to modify the surface of the splint. You can directly use the result of the designer, and if you want, you can modify it, because we have the same occlusal contacts and the same guidance which we can use for our patient. I would like to present you now the workflow of the splint designer in our CPO software. For this, I opened a measurement from the module Function and Digital Occlusion. I'm here in the View mode, and here on the right side I found the button for the splint management. Here we directly can choose which type of splint we want to do. We have the CTS splint, the comfort therapy splint, and the PTS splint, the positioning therapy splint. Also, we can manage here our material settings for our printer, for our milling machine, and we can create material properties profiles for our machines. I want to demonstrate you now the CTS splint, so I select the CTS splint here and I click on Next. In the first step here, we can now place our lower jaw in the positioning we want to use for our splint. For this, we have at the CTS splint the opening movement from our measurement available. And we have here in the occlusal tab the indicator if we have our target occlusal thickness over all teeth. So we can go now forward here on our opening movement, so we don't see anywhere any blue color on our occlusal tab. And this is where we achieved our occlusal thickness, and we can go on. Now we can place the insert direction for our splint. For this, we can simply drag the arrow around to adjust the insert direction, or we can use the slider here on the side to adjust it. The software generates a simple splint outline which we can now modify. For this, we have multiple tools available. We have on the first hand the brush tool, and with this tool we can add some material with the Shift key, and we can delete some material off the outline with the Control key. The diameter of the brush we can adjust by the slider here, or when you press the Shift or Control key you can use your mouse wheel. Then we have the Contour tool. With this tool we can simply place some points to modify our outline of the splint. And with the Control key we can also delete some of this outline. With the cylinder we can not only mark the visible side of our model, but also the not visible side, which can be really helpful when we have like some scan artifacts and we want to remove some outline material in these scan artifacts. We can use the cylinder for this. And the last one is that we can simply adjust the height of our outline preview to start our own design. Now I will make a splint outline which we can use with the brush tool.
And when we are done here on the outside, we can go on the inside. And as you see here, we have here now the undercuts blocked out by the software. As we see here, we have our scan, Arquator, go into the undercuts, and then we have our block out. On the design, we can now simply draw along the side of the undercut to have a good fit of our splint. If we go too deep into the undercut, it does not matter, the splint will still fit on the teeth of your patient. And now we have splint outline ready and we can go on. Here we have now our generated splint surface, which is already functional through our process that we use the occlusal surface also in our new splint position. And this splint surface we can now modify, edit with some tools. We have here the possibility to smooth parts of our splint. The strength and the diameter of this tool we can adjust with the sliders under the tool here. We have the possibility to reduce some contact points if we want. And of course we can add some contact points if we want. Beside these manual design tools, which only works on one point where you click, we have also global operations which will affect a complete splint, like with a static grind in, where we can cut out the intersections with the aperture. We can make a dynamic grind in, where we use our recorded movements like this tooth guided movement here to grind in our splint, our guidance we just modeled. And with next we generate our envelope. The longer the movement is, the more time this step will take. And here we see now our generated envelope, and with next we apply the dynamic grind in. When we click now in our history, we can now go to the point before the grind in. And here we see the static grind in and here the dynamic grind in. At this point, the splint is still very detailed, especially in the molar region. This will take time for a milling machine to fabricate. So we also added the global smooth option to make the splint more round, with less details but with nearly the same occlusal contacts to save time in the milling process. And now we have, for example, here our splint ready for the milling, and we can go next to check here now the section cut preview of our splint. If everything is like we want on the occlusal contacts and everything, we can give our splint a name if we want, give it a color in our Zebra software if you want, and we can give it a description so we know why we did this splint and the way we did it. With next, we save the splint and we can go now here under Export, Export Models, select the splint, for example the milling for the alignment of the splint, and click Next. Here we have now a special case. As you see, there is a teeth missing on this patient, and the CBUS Splint software gives you the possibility to create also bridges between two teeth. Like in this case, you simply don't mark the area between these two teeth where you don't want to have the splint placed on the gingiva. As you see, there is no marks at all between these two teeth, and you see there is a bridge also visible here already by these two green lines. And when we go to the next step, here we see now the bridge generated by the software, and this bridge we can now modify with the design tools. Like we can add material here to make it a more thick, and we can of course use the smoothing tool to smooth it a bit round. And this is how you create bridges with the CBUS Splint Designer.
This brings us to the end of this tutorial. I hope the steps were easy to follow and will help you to provide your patients with functional splints even more easily. If you have any questions about this module, please contact your local dealer. And with that, I hope you continue to have fun measuring. See you next time.